So step one in our strategic management process is going to be working through what our organisation's mission, goals and strategies might be. Now, you might enter an organisation as a manager that is already existing, in which case sometimes these will already be set for you, and part of your job will be to manage the continued alignment of these things, or perhaps to kind of calibrate them to what's actually happening in the environment, tweak them, or potentially start them again from scratch. And obviously, if you're starting a new venture, then you're going to need to identify these things from scratch. And so we're going to dig a little bit more deeply into this idea of what is the mission of an organisation. I'll give you a few examples just from industry in general, and then I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper with some examples from the music and the creative industries. So according to our book, a mission statement will typically include these factors. Now, in reality, this is quite an extensive list. And if we're talking about a mission statement, typically a mission statement will be quite short and pithy. And in some cases will be almost like a slogan. So you won't be able to include all these things, but it's definitely worth working through this list in order to determine what your mission might be. And then you may condense it down into a sort of more shorter and snappier version. The other thing you can do is articulate the mission in a series of things, and we'll see some examples of this in a few minutes. But just to quickly go through it. So first of all, who are your customers? So I know that we talked a lot about this in our entrepreneurship unit, labouring on who is our actual customer, and how are we going to be creating value for them. So being clear about who the customer is and the value that you're creating for them is going to be very central in any mission statement. Who your market is, so if you compete globally, in Australia, if you're just a particular city based, you may want to condense and consolidate that so that it's clear to both you and your customers where you exist. Your concern for survival, growth or profitability. So is your current strategy or goal about building and growing, or is it about maintaining stability? So just shoring up your market share, which would be probably more common for longer, more established organisations. What is the overall philosophy of the organisation? So we'll see this in a minute. This is often reflected in what are called value statements from organisations. Then what might be your concern for public image? So are you particularly interested in some aspects of the environment or social justice? Do you exist to serve an underserviced portion of the community, or to affect some kind of social change perhaps? What might be your key products and services? So not specifying them necessarily in detail, but you would probably make reference to the music industry if you were a music industry focused organisation. Is there something to do with technology that's particularly relevant? So this would obviously be the case if you're a tech firm. So say if you're operating in metadata or something like that, or if there's some kind of intellectual property that's technology based that is really central to how you do what you do. And then how does the company see itself in terms of its major, what we call competitive advantages? So what positions you against all the other alternatives that a customer could use? And what is it that you do better than anyone else or that you excel at? And then to what extent are employees part of potentially that competitive advantage or core competency? And how do you actually work with your employees or help support them in some way, shape or form? So here's a few mission statements that I've gleaned from a few different companies. As you'll see, most of them don't tick every one of those boxes. But the other thing is that these are just their core mission statements. So there's likely to be other documents that either exist publicly or more likely just internally to the company, that goes through each of those different components in much more detail and specifies them in a much more detailed way. But you can start to see here, and you might like to pause and then start to unpack these a little bit more in terms of which of the features that these tick, and do a bit of a diagnosis around what is it about these particular mission statements that either makes them very powerful or you think could help really direct and focus where they're heading as organisations. So I'm going to head next to a set of mission statement type documents from the music industry. These are all on StudentWeb, so I encourage you to start by downloading those documents so that you can look along with me as I talk to these. So this first one that we're looking at here is the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras Strategic Plan. And you can see here on page 3, after they've got, just a bit of an intro and their title page, they've set out our vision. And so the difference between a vision and a mission, so a vision is what you might call the North Star. It's like where, or their kind of ultimate endpoint, like what do they want to be at the ultimate level. So that's their destination. And it's often written as a more sort of visionary, inspiring type statement. So includes things like, they want to be a global leader. And so this is their kind of ultimate destination and ultimate purpose. And a mission tends to be much more about what the company does and how it does its business. So not so much about where they want to go, but how, like what they're going to be doing. But so you can see that their overall mission is reflected in these sets of components that they've got here. So it includes their vision, what their values are. So you might think about that in that list of the factors of or components of a mission statement. So these are their core values that they've specified. They then go into their way of working. So this is how they intend to work with their employees, customers, partners, and communities. And then they go into their goals. So this is where they're getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty around how they're actually going to set about trying to accomplish their mission and their vision. So you can take a look at those as well. And then they start getting into their actual strategies. So if you remember that part 1 or step 1 was about mission, goals, and strategies, then the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras have done a really nice job of sort of setting that out in exactly that format. And as you work through this document, you see that they actually then dive deeper into each one of these strategic priorities and talk about how they're going to accomplish it through the strategies that sit under each of these strategic priorities. And we'll get into that a little bit more in some later videos. The next one I want to show you is this one, which is from the Canberra National Folk Festival. And what's nice about this one is that it's quite compact and succinct. So it's a very snapshotty document, which is nice, particularly if you're not someone who wants to spend a lot of time planning and getting bogged down in that sort of stuff. You can look at this one and see that it's quite a nice, just very succinct, here we go, this is what we're about sort of document. And so this is their strategic plan for 2017 to 2020. So that again, they've got their vision, where they want to go, what they want to be known as, and then their mission, which is what they actually do. So it's about delivering the festival that has these particular features. And then you can see here as well, they've outlined their values, and then they dive down into their goals and the various strategies that they'll undertake to achieve each of these goals, and then what the actual metrics will be around each of those strategies. So take a look at that one in terms of that big picture, nicely and succinctly played out for you. The next one I want to show you is the Wangaratta Festival of Jazz and Blues. And what you can start to see here is different ways that this is quite a long document. Here it looks like it's been created as a set of slide deck, a PowerPoint slide deck, which makes it fairly easy to read. But again, you see the same types of information coming through. So their vision, very succinct, and what they do, which you might call their mission, their purpose, which is probably a bit more of a spelt out version of their mission. And then they start to go through what their value proposition is. So again, thinking back to that mission checklist, this is how they're actually creating value for their customers and their stakeholders. And then start to dig into some of their key metrics. And then we'll get to next, which is their external evaluation.
And then the last one I want to show you is this document that you'll find on Student Web, which is it's actually a student assignment that someone's written, which is a business plan for an independent record label. And it's actually a pretty nice example that I think a lot of you might be able to use as a template if you're going to launch your own label or some kind of music venture. And so I just want to draw your attention to this section down here on the 3rd page, I think it is, where they actually go through what their mission statement is. So in this case, they say that it's about particularly promoting female artists in the music industry and developing and promoting their careers. So that's their overall mission statement. They then go into their philosophy, which includes their values, and then their vision for this particular company. So again, you can see different ways of people formatting this information. And the thing is that this stuff doesn't happen by magic, right? So typically what will happen is that this will be a collective process where a group of managers or hopefully a whole kind of team will come together. Or it might start with some kind of entrepreneur setting out what the ultimate vision or mission of the organisation is. And then these things kind of get built out from that. So it can take a little bit of time to determine these things. But ultimately what we're trying to do is sort of set the overall direction and big picture idea of what do we want to achieve and what do we want to do from this venture.